What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and we are continuing the season preview series here for the 2021-2022 NHL season, going through all 32 NHL teams and looking what I think of them going into this year. And we're taking a look at the LA Kings today. So let's get right into it. So the LA Kings were one of the more active teams on the West Coast this summer. And they made it quite clear pretty much from the end of the offseason or the beginning of the offseason, that they wanted to potentially make the Stanley Cup playoffs next year and maybe even go on a run in those Stanley Cup playoffs. So with some of the moves they made, have they gotten better? So some of their departures. Now, Curtis McDermott leaves, not a huge loss. He leaves in the expansion draft. He goes to the Seattle Kraken. He ends up getting traded for a fourth-round pick to Colorado. Well, Colorado definitely got a little bit decimated with defensemen this year. A kind of a big loss in terms of adding some grit and size to the back end, but they still have guys like Kale Clague on that back end that I don't think is going to hurt them that much. But then when you also lose Derek Forbort, who now is a member of the Boston Bruins, now you lose both of those guys that bring that type of game. There is some questions about the LA Kings in that regard. So I'm a little bit surprised they lost both of those guys. But here we are. Both of them are out of LA. Now, the good news is that was pretty much it for subtractions in terms of bigger names that were going to be on the roster. Philip Denau, the big free agent signing for the LA Kings, that was a big one for them because now he adds some center depth. And you may be saying, well, you've got Kopitar, you've got Denau, you've got Alex Turcotte, you've got Quinton Byfield, you've got Rasmus Kupari. I probably missed some names. I mean, that's just how loaded they are down the middle now. So I think what Rob Blake did with this move is, listen, if Quinton Byfield, if Turcotte, you want to steal that spot back. Oh, Gabe Pilardi? Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. They have a ton of center depth. Now, the good thing is you can move centers to the wing. That's very possible. We see that happen all the time. So it's not this crazy thought. The good thing is they have guys that can play center. And that's something that the LA Kings seem to be putting a focus on. So good stuff there. They also added Victor Arvidsson in the trade market. And that's what I was talking about. They pretty much were the team that kicked off the offseason after the Tampa Bay Lightning had won the Stanley Cup within a couple of days. Victor Arvidsson was traded from the Nashville Predators to the LA Kings. And he's going to add some scoring depth to this team. He had a really down year last year. They gave up, I think, a second and a third for him, or a third and a fourth, some weird draft picks that didn't involve a first, which is good for the LA Kings not giving up that first because you just never know what could happen next year. So Victor Arvidsson comes in. Hopefully he adds that touch back that he had 3 years ago in that Nashville run that they had. So Victor Arvidsson comes in, adds some forward depth. Alex Edler comes on the back end. The long-time tenured Vancouver Canuck is now a member of the LA Kings. So an interesting move there. Edler's going to be a veteran on that back end. For some of these young guys, like Mikey Anderson, like Kale Clague, it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but Edler is there to help that out. Christian Willanan, another left shot defenseman. He comes in through free agency. He was I believe he was last with the Ottawa Senators, so now he comes over to the West Coast, probably a more promising team in LA than the Ottawa Senators. Sorry, Sens fans, but if we're going to be completely honest here. So Christian Willanan comes in, and that's pretty much it. Now, like I said, they're bigger additions. Now, they didn't make a ton of moves, but the moves they did make, you look at Denau. What is he, 27? Philip Denau, 27. Arvidsson, 27, 28. Edler in his mid-30s. Actually, he might be 35, 36. Christian Willanan still in his mid-20s. But you get the picture. A lot of these guys are already a little bit older, and it's going to help for some of the young guys that we're going to see come up next year. So when we take a look at the lineup, before we do that, we're going to take a look at the point leaders last year. And you kind of get an idea of who's going to have to take the load from last year going into this year. So you got Andre Kopitar, 50 points in 56 games, and that was pretty much it. They did not have a point-per-game player, and other than Kopitar, who had 50 points, everybody else, they were lacking offense, and that's why they added a guy like Victor Arvidsson, because he's going to do that for them. And like I said, some of the rookies and prospects that they're bringing in next year, one of the top 5 rated prospect pools in the NHL, we're going to see some of that this year. Drew Dowdy with 34 points. Dustin Brown had an emergent season, kind of a renaissance from the mid-2010s when he was beating up on the Devils and Rangers in the Stanley Cup final. Dustin Brown kind of came back to form, which was pretty amazing. Alex Iafallo, who they ended up re-signing, Kempe, Trevor Moore, Gabe Pilardi, Athanasiou. You're going to see these guys, these younger guys, Jarrett Anderson-Dolan, Carl Grundstrom. You're going to see more of those guys this year. And then you take a look at their lineup according to Daily Faceoff, and you got Alex Iafallo, Andrei Kopitar, and Victor Arvidsson. That's a pretty solid top line. You could still make an argument. We'll get to that. So we're getting to the second line. You got Kempe, Denau, and Dustin Brown. And you could make an argument they could probably add another winger in that top six. And I wonder if maybe one of those guys that doesn't play center on the third line, like Quinton Byfield, does that maybe mean somebody else can slot in? So looking at the third line, Trevor Moore, Quinton Byfield, and Andreas Athanasiou. I think kind of begrudgingly, Rob Blake re-signed Athanasiou. I don't know why that was such a weird thing. He seemed to do well 2 years ago in Edmonton. He kind of fell off last year, and everybody was hoping that was going to be kind of a cheap bargain signing and they could sign him long term. But here we go. It seems like he's kind of in that same rut. And then you go to the fourth line, and you got Gabe Pilardi, Blake Lazoie, and Jarrett Anderson-Dolan. And like I said, that's not even mentioning some of these other guys that they have. Let's be honest, Gabe Pilardi can probably play third line and be a pretty good third liner. Even same thing for Jarrett Anderson-Dolan. You could make an argument for those guys. And like I said, when you look at some of their guys that they have under contract, depth-wise, that's not even the end of the story. You have Brendan Lemieux, who you picked up from the Rangers at the deadline. Austin Wagner, Carl Grundstrom, that guy they picked up in the Jake Muzzin trade. Tyler Madden, who they picked up from Vancouver. Vladimir Tkachev, Alex Turcotte, Arthur Kaliev. Lias Anderson, the former first-round pick of the Rangers. Rasmus Kupari, Akil Thomas. They have some really solid forwards that I didn't even mention on this roster next year. Now, a lot of them will probably play in the AHL with the Ontario Reign. That is to be said. But that is interesting to see just how deep Rob Blake has made his team. And I think it's a compliment and a credit to him for what he's been able to do. And maybe with a little bit of a push from the guys on the team like Dowdy and Kopitar, they may have had some say on, hey, you know what? We're not getting any younger. We'd like to get back in the playoffs. So maybe that little bit of influence, a little bit of a kick in the butt, is exactly what they needed. Now you look at their defense, Mikey Anderson and Drew Dowdy, that went really well last season, so I don't see that changing much. Alex Edler comes in. I think that's a really nice addition. He may end up being a third-pairing defenseman by the end of the season alongside Sean Walker. But again, a different look because Curtis McDermott. Now you get Edler in that top four, which is interesting, to say the least. You also got Tobias Bjornfot and Matt Waugh on your third pair. And again, this is another position where the Kings are fairly deep. Brant Clark, the seventh or eighth overall pick in this year's draft. Helge Grans, Jordan Spence, Sean Dursey. I've heard of all those guys before. Cal Clegg. So they have some guys that could make some noise. What's his name? Jakob Morava. That's another guy that we could see jump into the lineup. So the LA Kings have some really good pieces to their team. And they're not one of those teams where they're coming out of a rebuild and they still don't have that depth yet. That's not the case with the LA Kings. They have the depth. The question is, will that depth score goals? That's really what it comes down to for the LA Kings. And the good news is they have guys that, let's say Dustin Brown doesn't perform as well. Well, you've got guys like Denau coming in, who he's taken a lot of criticism for not scoring goals, but maybe playing alongside Victor Arvidsson, Athanasiou, Iafallo, one of those guys, maybe that makes him the better player. So just some things to keep in mind. In terms of if I think they make the playoffs or not, will the LA Kings make the Stanley Cup playoffs? I think they do. I think it's because that Pacific Division is just really weak. And I could see them being that third team that sneaks into the playoffs. But then again, you've got the Edmonton Oilers. I think really you've got three different tiers in this division. You have the Vegas Golden Knights and the Vancouver Canucks. And you could even argue the Vancouver Canucks may not even be in that territory. I mean, if we're being completely honest. So, okay, The Vegas Golden Knights, they're in their own category. Then you have Vancouver, LA, Edmonton, and maybe Seattle, depending on how the Seattle Kraken do this year. So you're looking at one team that you pretty much can say for certain is going to make the playoffs in the Pacific. And then you got 4 teams that you don't know where they are. And then obviously you have Anaheim, San Jose, Arizona, Calgary, who I really think are going to struggle this year. Those 4 teams in particular. So you have one team that's making the playoffs, 4 teams that are bubble playoff teams, and then 4 teams that are just out. So we'll see how this plays out, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Will the LA Kings sneak into the Stanley Cup playoffs in the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs? Let me know in the comment section down below. Guys, make sure to share these videos. It does definitely help out the channel. The channel has been growing a lot recently, so I have to thank you guys for that. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.